Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We made reference to it in our conversation with Steve Moore yesterday, this interview that Tucker Carlson did with Trump's Office of Management and Budget Director, Russ Vought, from his first term, Trump's OMB director. And Vought gave a pretty good tutorial on the difficulty in dealing with the administrative state, what the Doge boys, as well as Trump's team, are going to be up against. He described it thusly.
So why can't you just, so if the president says, again, to refer to your example, I don't think we should be funding Ukraine, I'm elected, we're going to cut this off. If Congress wants to fund Ukraine, they can go ahead and do that, but the agencies are not going to fund Ukraine. So why wouldn't you just fire the people who disobey, who try to subvert democracy?
You've got to know how to fire them, and there are tools to do that, and the president was innovating in that space himself with what's called Schedule F, of essentially saying, if you work for me in your policy, a career official, think you're attorneys who are writing regulations, then we're going to create a new classification for you, and you are going to be what most of the country is, which is at-will employee. That's where we're headed, but there was also ways that...
Wait, why? I don't understand a system where a president, any president, Obama, Biden, Donald Trump, comes in and doesn't have control of the executive branch, because constitutionally he does have control. So like, how come you can't fire them? Why is it just not as simple as saying you're fired?
It should be, and this is one of the mountains of the administrative state. You know, this is how they have built their institution, by essentially having it be incredibly difficult to hire and fire employees. And so I'll get another example. When the president decided to take money from defense to build the wall, we had clear legal grounds to do it that Congress had given us. It's called transfer authority. And I told this to the Hill, and obviously this was controversial. It shouldn't have been controversial. Congress had given us very clear transfer authority. I must have had at least 3 times someone relitigate that decision from the career staff who work at OMB. Are you sure? Are you sure? I think we should oppose. I think this. Because, guys, the decision has been made. Execute the decision. And you see that everywhere, right? And if you don't drive it, you're going to get better. You're not going to be able to accomplish what the president needs you to accomplish.
How about...
So, it's a little bit like trying to hack through a rainforest with a Swiss Army knife. It sounds like, if you listen to the full distillation of this from Russ Vought. And so, the Doge boys and the Trump administration are in for some real intransigence, you can bet, with respect to the administrative state. And this is why the discussion of reductions in force, the Schedule F reform that Vought just mentioned, I mean, it really is not necessarily going to be a straight line in terms of regaining control of the government from the permanent government in D.C. It's wild, and it also speaks to the inertia for spending, because the people that are sent to Washington to rein this in don't have the appetite, don't really have the aptitude, and so things just continue on in the way that they have been going for, at least since the growth of the welfare state. For more on all this, let's go from one former OMB director to another. Yeah, he was OMB director for George W. Bush, in addition to being the former president of Purdue University, in addition to being the former governor of Indiana. He's Mitch Daniels. He joins us now. Mitch, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Morning, Dan.
What's your reaction to what Russ Vought was describing?
I'm sympathetic.
Yeah, I bet.
It's what he says is true, and I'm sure it's more true than anything that certainly that I dealt with those years ago. It's not brand new. Harry Truman, at becoming president, famously said, what kind of place is this? I give an order and nothing happens. so it's not a completely modern innovation. But no, I'm very hopeful about the prospects for something to change here. The country sent a message that it wanted to change. You have people with, I think, the will and the courage to try. And but I agree that it would help if they had some new tools. On the spending side, I for a long time, and after a lot of thought, have felt that restoring impoundment power to presidents was a good idea. By that I mean the ability, even though Congress may have voted for a certain amount of spending on a given purpose, the ability of a president to decide we don't need to spend all that and to withhold or impound some of it. There's an example of a tool, much like the Schedule F attempt that Mr. Vaught talked about, that would broaden presidential authority, but I don't think unconstitutionally or beyond what is good democratic practice.
The spending side. I mean, I remember the speech you gave. I think it was at CPAC back in the run up to the 2012 cycle, talking about the Red Menace, and you weren't talking about Russia or China. You were talking about red ink, our debt. And
right.
And so we were getting a lot of conversation. That's good. It's long overdue because of the Doge, because of Musk and Ramaswamy, and a lot of excitement about reducing the size and scope and expense of government. But it's mainly focused on personnel, focused on the administrative state, focused on perhaps eliminating vestigial agencies. But nobody still wants to talk about entitlements. And to address the debt concerns that you have, isn't that a prerequisite?
It is. Prerequisite. Let me say that the president has indicated he don't want to talk about it, and I was very disappointed that this last campaign, what I believe is the biggest issue we're going to face, and we cannot avoid, was off the table according to both candidates. However, I will say, you got to start somewhere, and one reason I have high hopes for their current effort is, particularly with if the Congress, a like-minded Congress, will support them. We need to see some breakthroughs that will begin to open people's eyes to what's possible and what will ultimately be necessary. Dan, I used to tell people as we were looking to trim government in Indiana, we did, by the way. When we left, we had the fewest state employees per capita in the country, and I used to say to people, "You'd be amazed how much government you'd never miss." So much of it has grown up, and it serves clients, the special interests of various kinds. The average citizen pays for it and benefits little or not at all. And so, I'm okay with them starting on the so-called discretionary side of the budget. There's so much that could be done there. And just to see, for instance, a Department of Education, if not eliminated, shrunk in a major way, which is clearly possible, and the sky would not fall.
Well, how much money would they save if they just eliminated? Well, I may not completely, but reduce the staff by thousands of jobs. How much would that mean to the taxpayers?
Amy. Only maybe you can hear the quotation marks. 10 or $20 billion. Granted, it is a smaller agency relatively. I remember when that was a lot of money. But it'd be less that than simply the object lesson of maybe just the muscle memory of learning how to do this. We're going to have to part with lots of the government we've built. If we don't do it, circumstances will, in a very ham-handed, probably cataclysmic way one day. So we might well get started. And back to Dan's question, if they can make some progress there, both in terms of size and activity of government, and therefore some difference on the spending side, maybe then the country will turn its eyes to the much more massive problem. How are we going to keep our promises in the safety net programs? How are we going to save those programs from imploding?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting approach. I mean, is that what you did in Indiana? I mean, I remember your sort of infamous was it penny on the tire of every state vehicle example? But the idea with there was that's a way to start to change the culture, to do the little things that are easier to do as the opening to do the bigger things that are more difficult.
Yes, absolutely. And changing the culture is, which here I think means as much changing our culture as a country, which has tolerated the growth of the state, tolerated the spending and therefore the borrowing that's funding it for far too much for far too long. That's what I meant when I said an object lesson. And we need to start some momentum the other direction. And if it needs to start or can best start with relatively small things, I never thought I'd say a $100 billion agency was small, like the Department of Education is, but then that's not a bad approach. And if we can if that group can have some early successes in one or two areas, they'd probably lead to larger ones later.
And it just since you did it, I referenced it. But what did you do with the pennies on the tires?
Oh, that well, we had noticed competing as outsiders that among many other things, there seemed to be an incredible number of vehicles that the state owned. It turned out it was one for every 3 or 4 employees, and yes, a little SWAT team of some of our folks went around and put pennies in the state garage and put pennies on the left rear tires every car, and went back in a month. If the penny was still there, give us the keys.
Wow.
So great.
I remember I had fun playing auctioneer. We auctioned off the 1,000th car. It was only about 4 months into our administration, but that's not a bad example of it showed people that the problem was real and in a way they could understand, and that these other things we were doing might be necessary too.
So I take it you left with a budget surplus for the state?
We did. We left with a big one, and Amy, and by the way, we paid down over half the debt of the state. Wow. You know a little about the state debt over in Illinois.
Yeah, not paying
how we
it off,
roll.
Though. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know anything about paying it off.
Right, and we left with a bill that says when those surpluses get beyond a certain point of safety, of clear safety, then automatically the balance goes back to the taxpayers per capita. So we think that it was a demonstration that you can run a railroad that way.
And are you optimistic about the new governor there, the former senator, soon to be former senator, now Governor Mike Braun?
I am. He's a business man. I know that helped me enormously to having had that long experience in business. He, I think, has the right instincts. He's trying to get some good people around him and sort of a new team. And Indiana's in good shape. Mm-hmm. By the way, thank you. Illinois continues to help in that respect as you drive businesses and people away. But no, I mean, I think he's got a good platform to build from. But he's a builder, and I'm very hopeful about it.
One question, putting your former university president hat on, thinking about reforms at the federal level. What about the $1.7 billion student loan market and thinking about perhaps maybe getting the federal government out of that business? I don't know that that's something that's Trump is supportive of. It's not something that's been discussed, but I mean, just thinking about structural reforms.
I think it is being discussed. People who are talking about dismantling or shrinking the Department of Education, many of them have said a major thing you do is get that disaster out of there. It's probably the single worst instance, and this is stiff competition, of federal government incompetence that we've seen. And that's a strong statement because there's so many of them. But, the federal student loan program was taken over under President Obama. They claimed it was going to be a money maker over time. Instead, it cost hundreds of billions of dollars. We know about the, vote buying plan, the vote buying attempts with the forgiveness of loans that they've attempted. And I think it's a very ripe candidate. if I were looking at it, I'd probably want to see about sending the whole thing, selling off that portfolio back to the private sector. Mm-hmm. But the idea I'm seeing in lots of places is move it over to Treasury, which is, after all, a bank already. The people at the Department of Ed have proven that they are very poorly equipped to operate that program.
When I think I said 1.6 billion, I meant $1.6 trillion student loan program. Yeah, exactly. Mitch Daniels, former governor of Indiana, of course, former university president. Mitch, thanks so much for joining us. And by the way, I know from my friend at Jim Sinclair at Old Florida, he says you're a pretty good stick, so we're going to have to play in the new year.
Yeah, you just want into my wallet, I know, and you'd probably get there, but that'd be that'd be fun.
Yes. Well, I'm buttering you up. There's no question. Governor Daniels, thanks. Thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hi, I'm Paul Jenkins, owner of Bancroft Architects and Engineers, a service-disabled veteran-owned small business providing design solutions for clients, including the VA. When looking for a trusted banking partner, Bancroft was lucky to find that partner in Signature Bank in 2015. With Signature, personal service goes beyond a login and a PIN number. My staff and I have the comfort of knowing that we're dealing with real people who know our business and care about us